FM on Melody Drive. I am Paul Lane, and you are watching the Weekend Boost, and this is KUHS. Thank you so much for joining us. Those of you who were with us on our last show, we got to, the opportunity to talk to a very prolific writer. This is a guy who's just 50 years old, and he's already written over 18 books, and he's starting to get into nonfiction. And watch out, world, man! This guy is really going places. As you know, normally I talk about a lot of books that we've had on the show and past guests and authors, and I honor that, and I always like to do that. But today I really want to get into the show. I really want to talk a lot about what we, the most recent book by Todd, because I've been delving into it, and it's a fantastic read. I think it's something that I think it could really fit to a lot of different people, from parents to a teenager, because it has so many facets, and we're going to be talking about that today. But again, thank you for joining us. I hope you're all enjoying this beautiful sunny day. If you're in Denver, we got snow coming in tomorrow, but hey, that's the way life is. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Todd, thank you so much for joining us today.
Gosh, well, thanks for having me on the show, like 2 times in a row even. This is great. I really enjoyed chatting with you. I enjoyed our last conversation about Summer of the Fetch. That was really great.
Yes. So the book we talked about on our last visit was Summer of the Fetch. Really very, very gripping story about a young man who's basically faced with a choice of living the rest of his life and having success and then dying, or dying on a cliff. And so it's a little bit simplistic, but honestly this book is really, really an interesting book, and I can't believe it's a fiction book. I keep thinking about a lot of the scenes that I've read in the book, and so The Summer of the Fetch is his most recent fiction book. And today we're going to be talking about his most recent book, just released book, and magic. I just love the title, Ordinary Magic. And I'm just going to go ahead and say this, before, as I was reading the book, and I had this in the back of my mind about magic, and your whole life you've sought this, your young life you sought this elusive feeling of happiness, of fulfillment, I guess maybe, and you call it magic, and I love the way you use that term so liberally, because it definitely translates to what the book is about.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the title came after an inspiration from my writing coworker, Chris Mandeville. She sort of had this surge of inspiration about calling it Ordinary Magic, and the reason was because in my early life, as you'll see in the first chapter, which I know you've started into the book, but you haven't gotten all the way through it yet, but in the first chapter, essentially the word ordinary was anathema to me. I did not want to be ordinary. And I think probably a lot of people feel that way. Like, you don't want to be ordinary. You want to be something special. You want to be, and I think our culture encourages that, right?
Yes.
And in the beginning, I literally wanted to find the magic that I was reading in these fantasy novels that I loved so much when I was in high school and junior high, about, magicians throwing fireballs, and dragon riders riding dragons, and all of that stuff. I wanted to find that in the real world, and ordinary was not on the table.
Yes.
And the interesting thing about this book was the evolution of it was that at the end the realization is that magic is everywhere. It's not on the top of some mountain somewhere that we're going to climb and then we will find it. It's everywhere, and the only difference is whether we look and see it or not. And in that first chapter, you see me looking and not seeing it. I just didn't. I wanted something that I had imagined, this expectation of what magic actually was. And over the course of this journey on the Colorado Trail, readjusting my perspective facet by facet, until all of a sudden I had this huge gasp and like, oh my gosh, it's here. It's here. It's everywhere. It's in the inspiration of my 14-year-old son hiking 450 miles.
Man.
I mean, like, so that's the gist of the book. And I won't throw out any spoilers about what happens along the trail. It's quite a wild ride in some areas, and very peaceful and serene in some other areas. The wilderness is a lot like that.
Yes. I got to tell you, and I was reading about, your list. And I turn the page and I get to the list, and it's like, oh my gosh, I remember that back into the day, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember, yeah, everything from your matches to your compass. I mean, it's such, those small details in a situation like that can be life or death, and so every element of your preparation and planning, all right up to your physical, preparation, it all has to be aligned, and it has to be just perfect to pull something like this off. I mean, that's a feat.
Yeah, I can't disagree. I mean, like, I went into it, as you see in the book, I kind of went into it almost, I wouldn't say cocky, but like, I was like, I'm a fairly athletic guy. I can do this, and but it'll wallop you upside the head. I mean, the smallest mistake can become a huge problem on the trail. As I noted in the story, what we carried on our backs everywhere we went, which was right around 50 pounds for each of us, every single thing we had a specific use, and about 70 to 80% of it was absolutely essential. Like, you drop one piece of it and you really are going to have to find a workaround. And some of them, you drop one piece of it and that's it. You got to get off the trail now, or have somebody help you out, or something like your water filtration equipment. You can't last 5 hours without that stuff.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's your lifeline right there.
Yep. Try going through a rainstorm without a dry pair of socks.
Yeah, I did.
I've been there. Yeah, I was a pretty avid backpacker in my day. So as I read through and page to page, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember. I can relate to this so well. It was very. I could relate so much to what the way you wrote it. I want to take a couple of steps back, Todd, and in the intro it talked about. It opens up and you wake up in the middle of the night and you hear this rustling downstairs, thinking that there's an intruder, and you get your big sword, your dagger, and you go downstairs to go face this intruder, and it's your son, Dash.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, and you said, man, I just messed up a dad moment, and
yeah.
I think that is so imperative that we talk about dad moments, because this is a book about life, but it's a book about parenting. It's about your relationship with Dash and how it evolved, and how you've really caught that in yourself before it was too late, and you really took a conscious effort toward a positive outcome. And I just wanted to throw that at you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I have an amount of pride of how I've been a father so far, but I will be the first to admit I have screwed up so many times. I mean, so many times I've failed to hit the level that I wanted to be as a father. And the only thing that I could do to keep myself moving forward is acknowledge, okay, that was a bad dad moment. That's, as you see in the book, that's what I call them. I call them bad dad moments. It's like, okay, I failed to hit the mark that time. There was something, because almost every situation, and I would say including the situations where there's a kerfuffle or there's a conflict, but I'm going to amend that to say, especially in those moments, there's a way to find something to make that moment into one of the best moments. I mean, if you can see, because almost always kids aren't out to get you. I know it seems like they are. Goodness knows I've had enough situations with my kids to think they are doing this on purpose. They are trying to screw me up on purpose. And when I sit back and look at it with the long view, that's not what they're doing. They're on their own journey. They're in their own heads. They're not worried about what your journey is. They're having their own thing and learning their own lessons. And for example, the scene that you're talking about, I just want to paraphrase for everybody who's listening. The scene that you're talking about is, I get spooked in the middle of the night, thinking that there's somebody in the house, and I go downstairs to, combat this intruder, which, I'm not all that excited about, because I'm like scared of getting into a physical confrontation with whoever it is that might be in my house. And then I realize that my son is awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, talking on the phone with his friend, and he's like in, 8th grade, and I'm like, this is not acceptable. He can't be up this early in the morning. It's a school night. And so I rush into his room with all of the rage of the Incredible Hulk and essentially just blast him with a whole bunch of anger that includes me being mad that I was woken up in the middle of a sleep, me feeling like I've got to make him adhere to the rules for his own benefit, and just this general sort of head of steam that I had going downstairs unleashed all of it on him.
Mm-hmm.
And this kid, who I just love this kid. He stood up to me. I mean, like, if my dad had come barreling into my room at 3 a.m. in the morning and unleashed all that fury on me, I would have whimpered and hid him under the blankets and been like, yes, I'm sorry, Dad, I'm sorry. And he's like, look, if my friend needs to talk to me at 3 a.m., I'm going to talk to him at 3 a.m. And I'm like, no, you're not. He's like, yes, I am. Anyways, so there's just this back and forth, but he stood up to me. And I'm so proud that he has that ability to do that. And as you said, moments afterwards, when I went out, I confiscated his phone. I went out into the kitchen, and then I'm like, damn it. Like, that was a moment where I could have done that so much better. I mean, yes, okay, you can say that I have some right to be upset that he's up at 3 a.m. He shouldn't be up at 3 a.m. And you could say that I have some right to be upset because I've been awoken in the middle of the night, right? And I shouldn't have been awoken in the middle of the night. Granted. But I could have handled that so much better, and I knew it just a second too late. Like, I couldn't stop my head of steam going into the situation, and that's what started this idea percolating that, you know what? Yeah, some days are good dad days, and some days are bad dad days. But the bottom line is I'm running out of any kind of dad days. You know, he's 14, and before I know it, he's going to be 16, and he's going to be driving, and before I know it, he's going to be 18, and he's going to be off to college, and then that's it. And in fact, it's going to happen earlier than that, because they get their own ideas about how they want to construct their lives around about now. And I certainly did, as I go into in the book in the first chapter, like when I started awakening to, oh, this is my life, and I better take charge of it. Well, he's already there, and I was like, you know, there is a very narrowing window when he's going to give a rip about what I think at all anyways, right? And so it was a wake-up call, literally a wake-up call to do something, and that's when the idea to hike the Colorado Trail, I should say that's when the ground was prepared for the idea to come along, because as you know, you noticed before we came on live, there's a moment where somebody pitches the idea to me. One of my best friends, Megan, pitched this idea to me because her daughter wanted to hike the Colorado Trail, and that's how it all gets started. But
you didn't even know what the Colorado Trail was.
I didn't even know what it was. But it was the seed that got dropped into that soil that had been, you know, ready that night when I made that bad dad decision. You know, it was like, oh, okay, I got to do better. I got to do something better. I have to, you know, seize upon this time. You know, the headlining news isn't that he woke me up at 3 a.m. The headlining news is that his ship is sailing past, you know, the shore where I stand, and pretty soon it's going to be off in the horizon, and I won't have any opportunity to influence him at all. So
it's powerful. I think it's so powerful, and I think any parent who's gone through the growth of an adolescent, and you know, I got to say that, you know, I could relate so much to Dash because I was that, you know, when I was 13 years old, I checked out, and I became more and more rebellious, and I didn't want to listen to anybody, and so I could so relate to both of your feelings, you know, because being a father, I've seen it from that end too, you know, and when he said he needed me, it's like, oh my gosh, it just, I mean, even as a reader, I was just speechless, because those are the moments in life where we can really look at them and say, man, this is what life is about. This is that ordinary magic.
That's right now. It's happening right now.
Yes. So tell me, at what point did you come to the realization that magic is really ordinary, that the little things in life really do make magic? I mean, what was it? Was it a one point, or was it like a progression?
I think it would be fair to say that I, and probably everybody, has moments where they realize that. You know, it's like, these are the special moments, you know. It's just that, unfortunately, the human condition is that we forget, you know. We get involved in what we're doing, and we forget these little sort of more quieter wisdoms, right? That want to tell us, oh, this is actually an important moment that you could do something great, as opposed to yelling at your son. You know, that it's there, but it gets trammeled over by my anger or by whatever else is going on. You know, your to-do list, or your fear of not getting that presentation done for work, or whatever it is. So was it one huge relampago, which I'll borrow that word from the author Steve Perry. I love that word. Relampago is the lightning strike of inspiration. And I'm not sure if he created that word, but he used it, and I have stuck with that ever since. So whether it was this relampago of this like lightning strike of inspiration, or whether it was little things along the way. I mean, for me, it was little things along the way where I have a relampago of remembering what I already knew, right? I feel like so much of my life is cyclical like that, where I'm like, I wish it was, hey, I've learned this thing, and now I don't ever have to learn it again. I'll put that on my shelf, and I'll always have it, and now I'm moving on to the next level of human evolution, and it just doesn't go like that.
Yes.
It's like, I keep stumbling over these things. I'm like, wait a minute, didn't I learn that already? I thought I already learned that. Why do I have to learn it again? So in this particular case, I mean, there's a part of me that was always appreciative of the little moments. I adore the little moments. But then again, there's that part of me that's always searching for that huge, epic, life-changing thing that's going to come along and make my life better forever, right?
Absolutely.
And I think at the end of this book, as you'll see as I wrap up this book, those two things come together as one, you know? I mean, it was, as you said, it was quite a feat to hike 450 miles through mountains that, you know, are generally speaking above 12,000 feet. You're up and down and up and down. I mean, it's a physical task to do it. So it is an epic thing, and at the same time pointed me very solidly in the direction of the little things. You know, this epic thing made me appreciate the little things. You're going to get to, if you haven't gotten to it already, this point where I talk about, you know, when I got off the trail, people would ask me, what's the biggest difference between hiking the trail and being at home? And, you know, I mean, like aside from the obvious that you're, you know, doing this physical activity all the time. And I responded to them that the key thing that I noticed was that at home, I have 482 things to pay attention to at any given moment. You know, I've got the bills that are coming in, I've got this that I got to do for the rental, I got this that I got to do for my, you know, publishing thing. I may have to make sure I write 1,000 words a day. Oh, and the dog needs to go out. Oh, the dog hasn't been fed. And oh, yeah, I need to give him some water too. And oh, now the cats want something. And oh, and then Dashiell called and said he's sick and I got to take him home from school. And then Elowen, who's working from home and doing school, is blowing up about the fact that, you know, I mean, you get my point, right? I mean, all this stuff is happening. And only one or two of those 482 things can kill you. Driving on I-25. That's like the only thing I can think of that I would do day to day that has a better than average probability of killing you, right? I mean, like my daughter not getting her test done or not, it's not going to kill anybody. Dashiell, you know, getting sick and coming home from school, not going to kill anybody. You know, the dog not getting water right now, not going to kill it. You know, all these things that are just so important in my mind and seem so gravely, you know, important that cause so much stress. Nobody's gonna die. But on the trail, you do not have 482 things to pay attention to. You only have 7. And so your mind, in a way, is at rest, right? There's only 7 things you have to pay attention to. But if you don't pay attention to 6 of those 7, it could kill you.
You could
6. 482 to 1, 7 to 6. That was the biggest difference. So it makes you real crystal clear about what your focus is. You don't get enough water, you die. You don't get enough food, you die. You know, make a bad decision and you step backwards and there's no step there, you die. I mean, like, you tangle with the wrong wild animal, you get my point, right?
Absolutely.
These things that you got to pay attention to are life and death, except for, you know, one of them. Like the list is in the book of all the things that I like. Okay, these are the things that I pay attention to more than once in an hour, every single step of the trail, and, you know, 6 of them you really got to pay attention to because it could be bad. Whereas, you know, so it's just the difference, I think, between being calm in the midst of real danger as opposed to being stressed out all the time in the midst of mentally fabricated danger.
Yes.
That was the biggest difference, if I can sum it up that way.
Very cool. I'm going to take a quick pause for a station identification. Folks, if you're just joining us, you are watching KUHS The Stream on Malady Drive, and I am Paul Lane. You are watching the Weekend Boost. Today we're talking to author Todd Fahnestock, and we're talking about his book, Ordinary Magic. Just to kind of catch you up, Todd took his 14-year-old son Dash on a 450-mile hike. And I have to say, you know, this has got to have been a life-changing event for both Dash and yourself. And you know, we were just talking about his experience and life and death situations, and how you have to prioritize, I guess, when you're in a situation like being, you know, in the back country. And,
Absolutely.
and one of the things I really liked is that you met a lot of people on the trail. And
Yeah, I really liked that too. They were so cool. I mean, that was a huge difference from being at home. And I live in Inglewood, so just south of Denver, and so I'm pretty much in the city. And you don't have to be in the city to kind of get swept away in all of the strife that is going on at any given moment on any different social media, you know, outlet. So much, you know, people coming at each other, you know, beating on each other verbally on line, and so much division and so much strife and all of these different things that are just like you could very easily think, oh my gosh, people suck. Like the world is horrible and everybody's at each other's throats and all this stuff. It's very easy to put yourself in an echo chamber where you really believe that. I mean, I've done it. And I get out on the trail, and it's so funny because there were some people, because I posted my journey on, ironically, on Facebook as I was going, right? Just to kind of like let everybody know what I was doing. And there were some people that were like, oh my gosh, don't do that. That's dangerous. Like, you could get eaten by a bear. There are weird, freaky people in the backwoods, and they'll just, like, you know, capture you and tie you up and kill you. You know, you should watch the reality show I Survived or something like that. And I was like, I don't think that's true. You know, I mean, like, maybe it is, but I'm going to go find out for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it couldn't have been the more opposite than that fearful perspective. When I was on the trail, the people that we met, they were helpful. They were interested. I mean, like, oftentimes you'll get into a conversation with somebody nowadays, and either they're kind of looking at you, or maybe they're playing on their phone and looking at you, whatever. I mean, the conversation is not as direct as it could be, right? And on the trail, it's like, boom, they're looking you straight in the eye, you know? I mean, this sort of genuine interface between you and whoever you're talking to. And I met so many wonderful people that one of the biggest takeaways from the trail that I was so excited about was the fact that I could honestly tell my son, there are good people in the world. People
Yes.
are more interested in helping you than they are in hurting you. And I'm not saying that this precludes the notion that aren't people, that it precludes the notion that there are people out there that want to hurt you. I'm sure there are people out there that want to hurt you. I'm not saying that there aren't. But I'm saying that by and large, the vast majority of people, and certainly everyone we met on the trail, was far more interested in engaging with us, helping us if we needed help, taking help from us if we had help to give. It was wonderful. It was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And I can only imagine doing this as a young person, like, say, in my 20s, and doing it alone, and the people that you meet would probably end up being lifelong friends. Like, you'd probably connect up with somebody. I saw a few people that, like, would connect up and hike part of the trail together, and I can only imagine how intimate and how amazing that connection would be by the time you were done hiking with them. So anybody who's, you know, I recommend it to anyone who wants to go hike the trail, but I especially recommend it to, you know, you 20-somethings out there that are like, what should I do for the summer? Go hike the Colorado Trail. If you're here, do it. You'll never see more gorgeous territory, and you could meet and make lifelong friends that you had never guessed you would.
Now, the Colorado Trail starts in Denver and it goes to Durango. Did you start in Denver or did you start in Durango? Because you were living in Durango at that time.
Right. So I was living
Or actually as a child. Yeah.
Yeah, when I was in high school, which actually kind of dovetails a little bit into Summer of the Fetch, which begins in Durango with this teenager that some of his life is based on my life. So that's almost like a precursor book in a way, even
Very
though
cool.
It is pure fiction. Well, not pure fiction, but it is mostly fiction. Whereas Ordinary Magic, every single bit of it happened. There's no fiction in that book.
Sweet.
But yeah, so it starts in Denver, and it goes 485 miles to Durango. So the reason that I keep talking about 450 miles is because we skipped 2 segments. We skipped the first segment through a lack of communication between my son and I, which you'll read about in chapter 4 or 5, whenever we actually get out on the trail. I had told him one thing, and I had since changed my mind, and he had planned for that one thing, and I never told him that I changed my mind. And so we're, heading out to the trailhead, and he's like, "Yeah, we're starting in the beginning of segment 2," and I was like, So, anyways, that was an interesting beginning, and then there's a moment where we're, my feet are shredded from blisters that I brought upon myself through doing the tough guy thing. I'm like, oh, I can tough this out. So that's a big part of the book. What happens to my feet in the first couple of weeks. And there's actually a moment where I decide to continue on with these shoes that aren't quite working for me, and I'm not paying attention to keeping my feet dry, and I'm not paying attention to all of these classic rookie mistakes that I even note. I'm like, all of you experienced hikers, I know that you're wincing right now in this parentheses, and every single experienced hiker that I've talked to that's read the book is like, oh, I was so right there, like you called it. I was like, no, go get the better shoes and stop hiking in those shoes, and what are you doing, you idiot? That's that moment of the book. But anyways, so after 2 weeks, we actually skipped segment 12, which I'm looking forward to going back and hiking again someday, just to complete that part of it. And then, of course, the first segment, I can go and hike that anytime I want. So, but we hiked 450 miles of it. So,
man,
yeah.
Now, at some point during your trek, did Dash no longer represent your son, but as a peer, or did you come to a point where you looked at him differently than you had before the journey started?
It's funny you say you haven't read this book, but it feels like you have.
Yeah, like I say, I had a lot of commonalities. One being a parent, but two, having been a backpacker, and I did quite a bit of mountaineering as a young man, and I know that I don't know. There's things that happen on that ordinary magic. All of a sudden, I'm just going to share this quick story. My girl and me were driving down I-70 one day, right there at Idaho Springs, and we saw the water wheel. And we went to where we were going, and on the way back, I just pulled the car over. I don't know what it was. I pulled the car over in Idaho Springs, and I parked it in this church lot, and I said, we're going to go for a walk. And I said, we're walking down there to this water wheel. And I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was a spark. I don't know if it was just a moment. But all of a sudden, I realized that this is the meaning of life. This is that magic, It was like it was so simple and yet so profound. And I just get the feeling that that's really the essence of your writing is just, oh my gosh, it's like magic is all around you, people.
Yeah. Certainly the theme of this book. Mm-hmm. Undeniably the theme of this book. And to answer your question, yes, I did look at him as a peer, and in fact, he surpassed me. I mean, there was here's a fun part of the story. In the beginning, when he's struggling and he's hates the straps of his pack and he doesn't like going uphill, and I'm kind of pushing him along and that sort of thing, because I know one of the things I stated about Dash in the beginning is and he hates when I say this, but it's true. He's a physical beast. Like he's one of those kids that like, you put him in a physical situation and he will get up to speed really quickly, right? And so I knew that was, while it was going to be difficult in the beginning, because it would be for anyone, he was going to adapt really quickly. And so I just kept kind of pushing him along. That was the beginning. And in fact, we had this system where I would kind of range out ahead of him because I wanted to keep a different pace than him. Mm-hmm. I would only go so far before I'd whistle. I'd whistle back to him, I'd just whistle back to him, and he would whistle, and I'd be like, okay, he's fine. He's close enough. Because we wouldn't be able to see one another, right? And then if I would whistle and then he didn't whistle back, I would wait a second, see if I could get him to catch up, and then whistle again, and then he'd whistle back to me. Or I'd turn around and start hiking back down the trail to see what happened. I was never more than, just out of eyesight, eye line of him. And at the end of the trail, it was the exact opposite. He was ranging out, probably even more, like sooner than halfway, he was ranging out in front of me.
Wow.
And then we came, at a certain point in the story, I talk about how we came to the aftermath of the 2018 avalanches. So apparently 2018 was a huge year for avalanches in the high country in Colorado. And there was just the right combination of, I think somebody had described it to me. I think it had snowed a lot, and then melted. It got really warm, and all that snow went into the ground and created this nice muddy consistency, and then it snowed a bunch again, and all that snow, when it started coming down the hill, those trees were just in soft mud, and they all ripped up. So the aftermath of these avalanches were, I mean, it was like a giant had taken a bunch of giant-sized toothpicks and scattered them down the slope. It was crazy how these trees had fallen. And it looked like, I mean, the force that had taken to do that to them was crazy, and it just completely obliterated the Colorado Trail. So you had to hike over these, logs that were stacked every which way, and I'm like, oh my gosh, is it going to shift? And if it shifts, I'm dead. Like these things weigh tons. I mean, tons and tons. And if it rolls over on me, I'm totally dead, right? So we had to pick our way, jumping from log to log across this thing. And Dashiell, of course, was much better at it than I was. He's 14, he's nimble, all of his reflexes are at their sharp peak. And I'm this 50-year-old carrying an extra 20 pounds around my waist, not to mention the 50 pounds on my back, trying to jump, on these logs. And so at that particular moment, I remember we came over the first one pretty much together. There were 4 of them. We came over the second one, and he had ranged out ahead of me. We came over the third one, and he was far, far away. And as I'm picking my way across the logs, I hear this whistle. He whistles back to me to make sure I'm okay, right? It's like, how's the old man doing with those logs? So he whistled back, and I was like, well, now the tables have officially turned. I was looking out for him in the beginning. Now he's looking out for me.
Man, oh man. That's I think the only word I can come up with is profound. Just the realization that, hey, this is my kid. My kid's becoming a man. My kid is he's not my kid, he's my peer. He's a human being that is it's my equal. I mean, it's just amazing.
And in some cases, making better decisions than I was making.
Wow.
And that's a little bout of humility for you, when you're like, you're doing these things that you're used to doing, and he comes up with a fresh idea that you're like, wow, why weren't we doing that all along? So yeah.
So tell me, give me a little, just a little brief synopsis of what was one average day like. What was it? You'd get up in the morning, roll your bag up, make your breakfast, and how was the day?
So there was actually, you would think, a pat answer to that would be, there was no average day. But the truth of the matter was, we lived by a routine. We got, because up there, like I said, all the things we had to do with life and death, and the more efficient you get about it, the better off you're going to be. And so we slipped into a routine that I am still trying to master in my real life, right? So the routine was, I would get up first because, I'm 50, and if I sleep past 6 o'clock, boy, that is a late morning for me. So I'd usually get up around anywhere between 4:30 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. And I'd lay there for a little while, then I'd get up, and it's cold, because even in the summer, even in August in the summer, up in the mountains, it gets cold in the morning. And so get up, and I'm just kind of shaking off the sleepies, and I start doing the morning things. So I'd set up the stove, get some water boiling, because our breakfast was going to be oatmeal, and then I'd start doing all the things that require, that need to get done before I mess with the tent. And sometimes I'd even start pulling my stuff out of the tent and rolling it up before I even wake him up. One of the things that was a routine was Dashiell not being so good at waking up in the morning. We were like the latest hikers on the trail almost every single day. On the trail, you leapfrog people. You see them, and then you move past them, and then they move past you. And almost everybody was up and on the trail earlier than us, because he's a teenager, and teenagers take a while to wake up in the morning, right? And he was even being really helpful for me. He's like, okay, we got to figure this out, Dad. I'm like, I'm here to help. Just let me know what to do. And he's like, why don't you shake me in the morning? So I shake in the morning. Doesn't work. He's like, why don't you cook breakfast? Maybe the smell will help me get up. Tried that. Didn't work. And he eventually got to the point, he's like, just strip the rain fly off, Dad. Make the tent cold. Just like, he started recommending me doing these cruel things to him in the morning to try and help him to get up. So it was really kind of cool that he was on board with that. So that was our morning routine. We get on the trail. We try and get the bulk of our miles before 1 o'clock, right? We try and get most of what we're going to do in the day. So like 2/3 of what we're going to do in the day by 1 o'clock. Didn't always manage to do that. We always had lunch on the trail. Lunch was typically a couple of Cliff Bars, some beef jerky, and a packet of tuna. So you know those little tuna packets that come all prepackaged? We carried a bunch of those in our packs, and it was great for the protein boost. And then snacks of nuts and you know, Gorp. If you know what Gorp is, I came to find out that a lot of people don't know what Gorp is. It's trail mix, but that's what I grew up calling it, was Gorp.
I've had Gorp. I know Gorp. Yeah.
Yeah, you know Gorp. And I think it stands for good old raisins and peanuts, I think is what it originally stood for. But there was some debate about whether that's true or not. Anyways, so then we, after the beginning of week 2, we always try and get over whatever summit we're going to get over before noon. Like, we got to at least start it by 11 o'clock to get up and over by noon. And because there's a moment in the book where I made the worst decision that I made on the whole trail and put us in a life-threatening situation that thankfully we got out of.
Wow.
But I was, yeah, that was one of those lessons where, well, to sum it up, we were running from lightning. We were in a place we shouldn't have been, and a lightning storm hit us. We were on top of a mountain in the middle of the afternoon, and we literally ran for our lives to try and get away from the storm. And so many fortunate things happened to keep us out of the grips of the storm. We were running into a headwind, which was keeping the storm behind us. So we were in daylight, but barely, and lightning was striking behind us. So, and I come to find later that if you get caught in a lightning storm in an exposed area like that, the best thing to do, this old hiker told me, his name's Mark, and he was great. He was like this Obi-Wan mentor on the trail, and Dash just loved him, and he had all these great tips about the trail. And he's like, yeah, if you get caught in a lightning storm, get low, don't lay down. You lay down and it gives you a bunch of contact with the ground, and you don't want that. He's like, your shoes are insulated, they're rubber, so like crouch down on your shoes and just huddle like an egg until the storm passes. Now, I've never done that. I've never tested that, so I don't know if it's true or not. And frankly, I don't ever want to test it. I don't ever want to have to be in that situation again to test it. And the way you don't get in that situation is you obey the rules of the people that have come before you and have tell you, you know, don't summit in the afternoon. That is axiomatic in Colorado, and I blew that big time, and we got caught. So, anyways. So in the morning, whatever we're going to do, we're going to summit it, you know, by 11 o'clock, hopefully at the latest. I mean, if we can summit it earlier, that's all to the good. And then, you know, get down the backside before noon happens. Usually you've got till about 1 o'clock, but you know what? I wasn't going to test it anymore. I was not going to be brave anymore about that and just say, the universe will take care of it. So then in the evening, we usually anywhere between, I think the earliest we dropped stakes was like 3 o'clock. That was our earliest day, but most of the time it was like 5 o'clock or later. Sometimes we actually hiked into the dark for a while. I think the latest we pitched our tent was around 9 o'clock, I think. We were really trying to push to get 20 miles, our first 20-mile day, and it started raining, and we're like, forget it. We're just going to plot the tent. We're just going to do it right here. And then we essentially hurry to make dinner, get out of, you know, all of our stuff, you know, put our food away, hang the bear bag, and then snuggle in and just crash. I mean, like, you after about 2 weeks on the trail, you will sleep hard. Despite the hard ground, despite everything else that's going on, you're going to sleep hard because you've just been working all day long. So that's a typical day.
Very cool. It's just amazing. So at the end of the day, did you carry, I'm sure you took lanterns with you, or a lantern, and you know, set up your camp and kind of sat around the campfire and just kind of chewed the fat.
I did not take a lantern. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I just said you just sit around the fire and talk and enjoy the scenery, the stars.
Yeah, so, gosh, I'm trying to think if we ever made a fire. I don't think we ever actually had a campfire. We never made a single campfire. We used the stove. We used the jet boil. We had a jet boil, and that's what we used to cook the food. There were only 2 nights that we had enough leisure time and enough energy to want to have leisure time. I mean, usually by the time we got to the tent, it was like get everything done we need to get done, get the tent set up, get our, our bedrolls rolled out, get our sleeping bags in there, put everything in there, hang the bear bag, eat our food, hang the bear bag, and then crash. I mean, we just wanted to crash. And the rare times that we had, like, I mentioned Mark, we had some time with him. There was this group that I called the College Six. There was a bunch of these college kids that were hiking a third of the trail, and I think they went to CU Boulder. And they all had trail names that I talk about in the book, that we sat around and we played chess and we had some food. There were a couple nights like that, but the idea of going and hunting for sticks and then making a fire and then putting out the fire and then using precious water to douse the fire properly was like, we got to get up and make 15 miles or more tomorrow. I'm not getting into all that. It's not like car camping in that respect. At least for us, it wasn't. And I imagine if we wanted to take, 2 months, 3 months to hike the trail, we could do more of that. Like you want to hike 6-7 miles in a day, set up a really nice camp, stay there for a couple days. You could do that, but we wanted to get done in 5 weeks. So there was no campfires, but there was a few nights where, we had some really good company that we just sort of gathered around the jet boil, bundled up, eating our food. And it's just those moments. I didn't miss the campfire, let me put it that way, because the camaraderie was so genuine and so wonderful that was what we focused on. It wasn't the ancillary things like s'mores or the campfire or whatever. It was just talking to people, because you've been walking for 3 days without talking to anybody, and all of a sudden it was so good to talk to someone, right? Somebody new. So that was more like our campfire situation.
Again, folks, if you're just joining us, you're watching KUHS The Stream on Melody Drive. This is the Weekend Boost, and I am Paul Lane. We are talking to author Todd Fahnestock. He's actually written very many books. We talked 2 weeks ago about his Summer of Fetch, most recent nonfiction book. Today we're talking about Ordinary Magic. Todd and his 14-year-old son Dash endured a 450-mile trek over Colorado's mountains last summer during the COVID virus, and they discovered magic. And Todd fascinates me because he's sought magic all his life, and he always wanted this profound, earth-shattering magical event to happen, but it always eluded him. And so what happened? What is it that started exposing you or making you realize that, man, this is magic? What was it that
I think, I think it was just, like I described before, about the 482 things that I think about in my normal life, and the 7 things that I was required to think about on the trail. And as all that mental chaff just sort of floated away, it really made me focus on the things that were amazing all around me. Now, to be fair, you're never going to get better views than you'll get on the Colorado Trail. So it was easier looking at this gorgeous vista to go, oh my gosh, it's all here. All the things that are so amazing are right here. Comparing that to looking at, maybe a dirty gutter at the side of the street or whatever as you're walking home, they're two different, views, but the essence was the same, because the things that we appreciate most, generally speaking, well, I won't speak for everybody, the things that I appreciate most surround me all the time. And whether I look at them or not is really the only question. I've got a wife I adore who I think some of the time adores me back. I've got kids who actually I can relate to and can relate to me to a certain extent. For sure, there's some generational gap stuff there that when I say something, they kind of look at me, sideways. But that's to be expected, right? There is a generation gap there. There's so many wonderful things. And so getting wrapped up in all the things that aren't going my way, that's a choice. I can choose to do that, or I can choose to get wrapped up in all the things that are awesome.
Yes.
And the trail really helped me see that, because those things that I generally occupy my mind with to make me feel horrible about the things that I'm not doing were not accessible. That's what it did. It took away those things that I could, be mad at myself about, Oh gosh, you didn't take the trash out and trash day was yesterday. Well, I'm out in the middle of nowhere. I can't take the trash out anyways, So all those things just sort of floated away, and it enabled me to see that even with all those things there's so many wonderful aspects about life and all you have to do is turn your view on, turn your
Yes.
eyes on.
Yes, and it really is a matter of perspective, and it really is important for us to really look at the small things. You know, the saying "stop and smell the coffee" has so much merit. I mean, it is so relevant to what we're talking about today, because the coffee is the magic, man. You know, I guess for me, when I was reading the book and I was thinking about, I just couldn't help but put, just kind of look up and think about magic. Yeah, there's so many times that it's right in front of us and we don't see it because we're looking for the magic,
Right, right. Oh, there was, so have you seen that movie Soul, the latest Pixar movie?
No, I've heard of it.
So, spoiler alert, so anybody who's wanting to see it, turn your ears off for a second. There's a point at which, so this guy is seeking this thing that he's wanted, and I'll try and be as general as possible to get to the quote that I'm looking for. And he finally gets an opportunity to do this thing that he's been wanting to do all his life, and he gets a shot with this person who is much further along this path that he wants to be on. And after he does this, he walks out and he's just kind of like, gosh, I thought it would be different. And the mentor character looks over at him and is like, I have a story for people like you. So there's this fish, right? And this fish is swimming through the ocean, comes upon another fish, and says to the fish, I'm looking for the ocean. And the other fish looks at the little fish and is like, this is it. You're here. And the fish says, no. This is just water. I want the ocean. Mm-hmm. And I just think that story encapsulates it all, right? We're in the ocean, and yet here I am constantly looking for the ocean over and over and over again. I need to get to the ocean, and it's here. It's all here, all the time, anyways. Not to say you can't have goals. I'm not saying don't have goals. I'm not saying don't strive to become better, to become excellent. But the things that can make you happy, I think they are at your fingertips. I mean, they're there, and we discount them because they're ordinary. Mm-hmm. Right? That word that I hated so much when I was younger. That's what these things are. They're ordinary, but there's magic there.
There truly is.
Magic.
Truly is. Now that my daughters are both grown and on their own, and they take a moment to give Dad a call, I think that for me, that's what's magic to me. I mean, it's not the big things. It's not the new car. It's not a house. It's not furniture. It's not anything big. The magic is in the little things. I've always been, people have kind of made fun of me because I get more excited about a fishing reel than a brand new car. And it's like, you know what? I guess I've been very fortunate to see magic in a lot of things, but I overlook it so much, and I think we all do.
It might be like, I wonder sometimes whether anything has intrinsic value. I mean, we imbue events or items or people with value based on our frame of reference and our experience. I mean, and you could probably make an argument that something has intrinsic value, but I don't know if you could. I mean, maybe you could, but like, I mean, you think about the money that we use, like that is an artificial construct that we've used with our society. It doesn't have intrinsic value. It's paper, right? Mm-hmm. Even gold itself doesn't have intrinsic value. It has the value that we perceive that it has as a culture, as a society, and if everybody can get together and agree on the value for something, well, that makes it even more valuable, right? But it is an agreement. It's a tacit agreement amongst, in some cases unconscious amongst all these other things. So when you talk about having a fishing pole excite you more than a brand new car, well, I would completely believe that. Mm-hmm. And it probably is because you, at some point in your past, have assigned whatever things you value the most. This is an icon that represents those things that you value the most. And True. So, and that's a wonderful thing, right? Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful thing, because if we could consciously put ourselves in charge of that, of what we imbue with value, just imagine the amount of control we'd have over our own happiness.
Absolutely.
I mean, just a thought to throw out there.
I agree. I think what you're saying has so much merit, Todd, because I think that in my own life I can see times when I've passed by such beautiful, wonderful things, whether they be memories or whether it be a mountainside or whether it be, whatever. I didn't appreciate it because I was looking for something else, and it's like, it's there.
Right.
That which eludes you is, you're standing on it, it's earth. It's, you know, it's where you are.
Right.
No,
Yeah, I mean, that moment that I had with Dash, the bad dad moment in the very beginning, that's exactly like that. It's like, you're thinking about this thing, and there's this over here that could be important. And I was so focused on getting back to sleep, and I was so focused on reprimanding him for not being, you know, asleep when he should be asleep, that I missed this thing over here. This moment to have compassion and ask him, well, is something really going on with your friend? You know, what is it that we can do to help the situation? And I think it's amazing that you are protective of your friend. I mean, like, these things that I could have done to help him feel better about his choices and his decisions, even though it was at cross purposes with what I mean. That was one of those moments that the thing I was focused on kept me from seeing the other thing that
Wow.
could have been magic.
And now, since you've returned from your trip, what kind of changes have taken place in your life, especially in terms of your relationship with Dashel? You know, tell me, what kind of things have happened since your return?
You know, it's hard to say whether he would have come to the place that he is now on his own. I suspect he would. I think that, and I'll describe that place in a second, but I think that the trail certainly supercharged it. I mean, like, it's like anything, any experience we have. It's a microcosm. The way we react to any experience we have is a microcosm of the way we react to our life.
Certainly.
Right? And because of the epic journey of it, and because of the way that it isolated us, it's easier to separate that as a microcosm of life in general. And he went through some stuff. I mean, my favorite moment on the trail didn't have anything to do with me. It had to do with Dashel, and the chapter is called "My Favorite Moment." So if you want to skip ahead to it,
I absolutely will.
So, anyways, but he. Okay, so I'm gonna tell a story to tell this story, right? There's a guy named Blake Snyder, and he wrote a book called Save the Cat. And anybody who's a writer of screenplays probably knows about this book. And anybody who's a writer of anything, there's a good chance they know about this book. And he essentially laid out this framework for how to write a good story. And in it, he gives lots of examples of the different stories that are written, and he creates his own list of genres as to how stories fall into it. One of the genres is called coming of age. We all know coming of age movies, right? And a coming of age movie is one where you see somebody go from being this innocent sort of naif to learning something about the world. Oftentimes, you know, it has to do with, you know, if the main character is a boy, it has to do with this romance that he, you know, or boy or girl, it's a romance of whoever it is that they're involved with is often mixed into this, because that's one of the things that we're learning about when we go from age 14 to age 22, right? And he talks about how real coming of age happens over the course of about 5 years, right? I mean, but every movie we've ever seen, out of necessity, they gotta condense that so they can put it in a movie, and usually it happens over the course of a year at most, and most of the time it's over the course of the summer, or even over the course of like a weekend in some cases, where it's this coming of age thing that happens to the main character, right? And so realistically, you can't expect to watch your daughter or son come of age, right? It happens over too long of a period of time. And to answer your question, I got to watch that actually happen over the course of a summer. I mean, like, I got to watch him go from, in a very specific moment that I called my favorite moment, where he was being childish, stopped himself from being childish. He not only identified that that's what he was doing, he stopped himself, and not only did he stop himself, but he created this. He's like, that's not the guy that I want to be. I want to be this guy, and I'm going to act like this guy starting now.
Wow.
And he did.
Wow.
Boom.
Wow.
Just boom. I was like, oh gosh. Most adults I know cannot do that. That is amazing that you plucked yourself out of this bad, horrible place, just through sheer force of will, put yourself into a new place, and then went forward with confidence with that new paradigm. I mean, just mind-blowing. It is the coming of age trope happening in about a day.
Wow.
It was crazy. It was crazy. Less than a day, a matter of hours. So, and of course, like I said before, these wisdoms we think that we put on the shelf and we'll always have, we have to relearn them. So it's not like he was all of a sudden this enlightened guru forever after. We went through, you know, difficult moments and arguments and things like that after that. But wow, to see it in action, that was really cool. Really, really cool.
Yeah, and it is something to see. It's amazing. Hey Todd, if someone wanted to get a hold of you or buy one of your books, how can they get a hold of you, or where can they find your book?
Excellent. So toddfaunastock.com. So that's my name.com. That is the easiest way to find all my stuff. Yep, Summer of the Fetch. So yeah, that's how you spell my name. So it's just Todd, no space, faunastock.com. And that's two D's on Todd. And then also Amazon. I do a lot of my stuff on Amazon these days. You can find some of my books also at Tattered Cover here locally. So definitely hit the Tattered Cover if you want to find some of the books that I have. But yeah, website's the best place to go first to make sure you can see everything that I've done and choose the ones that you want. Typically, I write epic fantasy, which is interesting because both times on the show I haven't talked about my epic fantasy books. You can see this poster over here. I'm going to get a little sunlight.
Yes, I was glancing at that earlier. The Tower of Horror.
Yeah, Tower of the Four is my most recent series, and actually, for those of you who've never done fantasy before, it's actually a good place to start because the episodes are really short. They're about 30,000 words, which is about 100 pages, and it's this epic journey. And there's about 5 of them out there now, and I've got a 6th one on deck ready to come out soon.
Wow.
So I'm very much into the swashbuckling, lots of magic that comes at a price, and heroes that never quit. And lots of interplay. This story. There's 4 characters, as you can see in the poster. One of them is very small in the poster, but there are 4 there. And this I wrote with this sort of background theme of how it's over the last several years we've all seemed to be at each other's throats. Like so many different ways of thinking, clashing with other ways of thinking, and people hating one another for their politics or for their ways of thinking. And these 4 characters are like that. Like they each have a different way of looking at the world, and yet in this world, you can't learn magic unless you join with 3 other people making a quad, this foursome, that then you can unlock magic. In this world, there are 4 paths to magic: the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, and the physical. And unless you have one person for each one of those paths, then working together, you can't actually access the magic at all. So they have to learn to like one another is the point. Well, maybe not like one another, but at least work with one another and figure out how to work together. Because that was something that was weighing on my mind, this concept of unity and wanting people to have more unity. And so that was the background theme of that story.
Very cool. Very cool. I mean, guys, I really challenge you to go pick up one of Todd's books. I love the Summer of Fetch. I really like that in the Ordinary Magic that your chapters are very short. They're very descript, and yet they're very complete. I mean, you really covered a lot of information without jamming it down their throat. I mean, it was very easy to read, very, very pleasant, feel good. I mean, it's like I loved when you really look at yourself and say, "Man, I screwed up." I think that's important for a man to do, or a woman. I think it's I think one of the most important things for our child to hear is "I'm sorry."
I agree with you. Couldn't agree with you more. And the fact that I've been a big proponent of saying I'm sorry to my kids when I screw up since they were, old enough to understand what I was saying. And you know what a cool benefit of that was? They apologized to me when they screwed up. How cool is that?
Absolutely.
They learned how to do that, how to be able to say, okay, that was my bad, and I'm going to take care of it. That's responsibility. And as much as I wanted them to think that I was right, so they'd listen to me when I was wrong, and telling them was always a good thing. Always a good thing. Yeah, and it's tough. That's hard to do.
Being dad is not being a parent is, there's no book with it, it's just a learning experience. I used to do motivational speaking in the Denver Public Schools, and my first day in there, I would go to get the biggest kid in the class, and I'd bring him to the front of the room, and I would tell him, I want you to do what comes naturally. And what I would do is I'd put my hand on his chest, and I'd walk him to the wall. And of course, the kid would come and push back, and I would tell him, you know what, that's what parenting is like. There's not a book on parenting, there's not a book on childing. So what we got to do is we got to figure a way to work it out and to make it so that we're not pushing each other.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what you did.
Yeah, it's not the parent laying down the law, it's creating communication and working together, like you said, working together to find that system. Because even if there was a book on parenting, and actually there are plenty of books on parenting, but even if there was one definitive book, I don't think that it would apply to every single, I mean, you can get bits of wisdom from every single one of them, but none of them is going to be the script that you can follow to make a successful parent. I think you got to figure it out yourself.
You have to figure it out yourself. Yep, there's just no easy way about it. You have to figure it out. Guys, our time is up. And I could talk for another hour with you, Todd, man. This is such a fascinating topic, and I think you've just laid it out in a way that I think people are going to want to read. I can see this book on people's shelves, and those of you who are reading, reach out to Todd. Make sure, get his book. I'll hold that cover of that book up again, if you would, Todd.
Yeah.
The Ordinary Magic. This is his first nonfiction book, and very, very well done. He's gone over the Colorado Trail, 450 miles of hiking with his 14-year-old son. A book worth reading. Folks, you've been watching the Weekend Boost. This is KUHS The Stream. We've been talking to author Todd Fonestock, and I thank you so much for joining us. Get ready for some wonderful music. Paul Chavez is coming up. Hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Todd. Appreciate you.